So today we'll be talking about colorwork and specifically Norwegian colorwork, Norwegian knitting thimble. This is one of my favorite knitting tools. It's really super handy when doing color work. It allows you to knit with very even tension and to catch your floats with very minimal effort. Here I have two different swatches. This is the Choose Love Cowl by Kelsey Stevens of Primrose Yarn Company, a dear fiber friend. Thank you so much, Kelsey, for giving this to the knitting community for free. It's an awesome pattern. It's great practice for first-time color work. Here we're going to be discussing stranded knitting, just a few tips in the beginning, and then we'll get right into the Norwegian knitting thimble and why I love it so much and how we use it. Just a few things about color work. I love to catch my floats. I know it's kind of trendy right now not to catch your floats. I like the way it looks to keep a nice tidy backside to my work. I think that it looks really professional. I think that if you catch your floats, you're less likely to catch them on, say, your glasses, your earrings, your rings, what have you. If you're making children's sweaters, you know, it's really easy to get a little finger caught in there, especially on baby clothes or, you know, young children. So yeah, I like to catch my floats. I prefer to catch my floats on stitches more than 4 of the same color. I'll catch the next float, but we'll go into that more later. So just to talk a little bit more about color work, it's important to keep in mind when you start your project which color you want to be your dominant color. You'll see some patterns will tell you which one is your dominant color, which one is your main color, contrast color, what have you. When using the Norwegian knitting thimble, it's important to decide which one you are going to assign your dominant color because it depends on where you put the yarn here on your thimble. So again, a little bit more on that when we get to loading up the thimble with your yarn. Okay, so beginning our work here, we're just going to be doing a little swatch with the Choose Love Cowl. I'm going to be using the colors here, so let's get rid of this swatch. For this particular swatch, I used on this project here, I used the red color as my contrast color and the green color as my main color or background color. Your contrast color wants to be your dominant color. It allows the pattern to pop out from the design. So in this case, I want my hearts to really pop. And here the multicolored yarn was my dominant color. As you can see, it makes the contrast color really pop out from your work, which is what you want. So in this case here, I'm going to be doing the same just to make it easy. So when you're loading up your Norwegian knitting thimble, what you want to keep in mind is that your left hand hook here is going to have your dominant color. Okay, so your right hand hook will have your background color. So I like to put my Norwegian knitting thimble on like this. There's a narrow side and a wide side. I put the wide side on first, and I like to put the right hand hook on the bottom underside of my index finger. I just like the way it feels right there. You can experiment with where you like to wear it. I know some people like to wear it up here. I like to wear it about right there, okay? And then you're going to load the yarn. As you can see, you have 2 prongs. They should be facing in this direction. The bottom one should be swirling out to the right, and the left one should be swirling out to the left, okay? So our dominant color needs to go on the left-hand side, and in this case, it's going to be my red color, which I have casted on here on my needle. You can cast on as few or as many stitches as you want for practice. We're going to be knitting a swatch in the round, and we'll get to that in a moment. But to load our Norwegian knitting thimble, we go like this. We're going to grab our yarn, which is attached to our work here. So this is my leading to the ball of yarn, okay? We're going to grab it, and we're just going to make, I like to loop it around my finger like this to make like a little loop. And it's important that your strand leading to your work is in the front of your thimble. You see that? So it goes into my thimble, leading over the hook, back behind my hand, going here, flowing into my ball of yarn. Okay, so this is connected to my work through the front. Let me load that up again for you. So all I'm going to do is take this strand here, and you can see that the loop goes this way, kind of like a swirl going to the left. So I'm just going to take this and make like a little, tension the yarn a little bit so that way I can just snap it into that open spot. And then that way my yarn is running through the bottom coil here, through the back of my work. This seems to be the trickiest part for folks new to the Norwegian knitting thimble, but as you can see, it's just allowing the yarn to flow here across that bottom coil. Okay, and again, that's our left side, so that is our dominant color. So we just let that hang there and get that out of the way, and then we're going to go ahead and grab our other color, which is our background color, which is this light color here. And again, this is my tail because I'm just now attaching it to my work. If this was my work already, say you had already cast it on your yoke, you would already have your main color attached to your needle here. So this is how you would work in your new color. Okay, so you're going to keep your tail in the front of your hand with your working yarn running back to the ball, just like we have on our left side here. And we're going to take our work. Again, we're just going to make like a little loop so that way I can have a little bit of a tension, so that way it makes it easy to slide it on. And I like to just hold my finger, like I said, I have it underneath like this, and I just take that with the tail running in the front over my thumb and a little bit of a tension loop, and I just snap it in. Do you see that? So I'm just taking the yarn this way and putting it into the coil and around, and I just take this front little strand and pop it over the front, so that way it's running again just like this one was, so that way my working yarn is running back behind, going here, flowing into the ball of yarn, and here's my tail running down. So when we go to knit, we're going to be knitting into these two strands here. These two are running through the back, the palm of my hand, flowing into the balls of yarn. And this is just the trickiest bit to get down, and I'm really glad that you guys have a video now to reference, so it'll be easy for you to go back and rewind, watch me do that over and over until you got it. So here we have our strands. I like to tension by holding them in my hand like this. I find it the easiest. In color work, you don't want your tension to be too firm anyway, because otherwise your stitches will be all gathered up. So just hold them in your hand like this, and you're kind of holding the working strands and your left hand needle all at the same time. So it takes a little bit of practice, but you're continental knitters, so you got it. I like to hold this first little beginning tail. Again, this is how it would be if you were starting your color work in your sweater after you knitted the first part in the main color. So I like to hold it here with my middle finger just to give myself a little bit of tension, because these are the strands right here that I'm going to be knitting into, here and here. You don't want to be knitting into here and here, because these are running back into your balls of yarn. Okay, so we're going to be knitting here into the front and here into this front stitch, and then these are going to be feeding up and into your working yarn here. So this is what I like to call starting position. Again, if I was to see my work here, I have my two strands here in the palm, and then I'm holding my left hand needle gently with my left hand ready to go. And I'm going to be knitting into this strand here and this strand here. And again, my left hand strand is my dominant color or my contrast color here. Okay? So let's grab our right hand needle and begin. The first stitch is always a little bit tricky, but if you'd like, you can go ahead and slip that stitch, so that way it's just a little bit easier for you to begin your work. Let's just get the hang of it. I like to just knit a few stitches in my left hand color here just to get it going. And let's just alternate and practice grabbing each strand of yarn. As you can see, I am not moving my index finger around very much. I'm holding it steady. It's basically just an anchor for my thimble to rest on. And you just simply reach in with your right needle, as you're used to doing with continental knitting, and just grabbing the color in which you would like to knit. So here we're just alternating one and the other. And I encourage you to just ignore the pattern in the beginning and just swatch and practice and feel how that tension feels running through the palm of your hand, how the yarn feels running through the thimble, and knit across your swatch, just alternating very simply. There's no need to catch floats when you're just alternating colors, and it allows you to get the rhythm of the tension and the way that it feels running through that thimble there on your index finger. And as you see, as I stretch out my yarn here, how even and perfect all my little stitches are, because it's being fed so evenly through our thimble. So when knitting a swatch in the round, it's important to knit your Colorwork swatch in the round for a number of reasons. We covered them in our class. I'm not going to go into too much depth here as to why we swatch in the round. There's plenty of tutorials out online about swatching and why it's important to swatch in the round, but let's just succinctly go over the fact that you knit a sweater in the round, so obviously you're going to want to swatch in the round because there's no purls. And if you're purling and swatching back across this as if you were doing a normal swatch where you would just purl back across the wrong side, your measurements aren't going to be the same as when you knit a sweater, because we know we never purl in a sweater knit in the round. So to go ahead and swatch in the round with your Colorwork, we're just going to push this back to the beginning of our circular needle here. Kind of like brioche. If you have a brioche, you're just starting back to the beginning again. I'm not doing anything fiddly with my thimble. I'm just letting my yarn carry through my hand here. So to get reset back into starting position, we're just going to drag a big loop through the back of our work. This is kind of cheating, saying that we knit the wrong side, but we didn't. We just pretended like we did. So we're just going to leave like a nice size loop in the back here and just pretend like we're back at the beginning of our pattern. At the end of your swatch, if you leave a big enough loop, you can actually block your swatch without cutting those loops that you've left through the back of your swatch here. I like to cut them. If I have enough yardage for my pattern, I'll go ahead and just cut them, because I like to just keep my swatch. I think they're kind of fun. I don't know. But you can leave a giant loop in the back, and then that way you can stretch this out and block it without cutting this, and then you can reclaim the yarn from your swatch and waste no yardage, which is really good for some of these patterns out there right now. So we're back to starting position. We just have a nice big loop running through the back of our work here. It's our faux wrong side, since we're just going to be continuing to work on the front of our work over and over and over, so that way we can swatch our color work. So to begin again, just to get the flow of holding your yarn, we're going to have our 2 strands running into our palm here. Again, left hand strand is our dominant color or our contrast color. If you see here you have quite a bit of loose tension, all you have to do is just reach behind and grab this to pull it through to make that tension back to normal. And again, I like to go ahead and slip that first stitch. And let's alternate this time. So last time I knit a red stitch, so let's go in and grab a green. And again, you're pulling from the front of your strand. You're never going to want to pull from the back right here. You're going to want to pull from the front here. And again, that first stitch is always a little bit tricky, but with practice you'll get it down. And you see, as soon as you start those first 2 stitches, it's really easy to pick back up, and your tension becomes even again. So we're just going to knit back one more time across, alternating our colors, getting the feel for that thimble. And then on the next round, we'll go ahead and cover how to catch floats. And it's totally up to you. It's your prerogative how often you catch your floats. Again, there's some people don't catch floats at all. I just really like to catch my floats. I might be a bit OCD about it, but again, I just think it gives a really nice, clean, professional appearance. And with the Norwegian knitting thimble, it's really easy. So let's go ahead and show you how easy it is. So let's push our work back again to the beginning of our knitting needle. And again, the reason why we do this is we're not purling back across the wrong side. So we need to go back to the beginning of our work and leave a big enough loop here in the back so that way we can kind of pretend like we knit back across that wrong side. And that's why we knit a swatch in the round, so we can always knit instead of having to purl. So to catch our floats, it's quite easy. Let me show you how we do this. Let me get this first stitch out of the way because he can be a little bit tricky, as we know from class. The first stitch is always a little bit wonky. I like to leave a few extra stitches in the beginning of my swatch to cover myself, because I know that those first few stitches are always a little bit wonky. So I leave a few stitches in the beginning as extra, as anchor stitches, I call them, and then that way these are those stitches right here. And we're not going to measure this bit. We've left our swatch wide enough that we have our 4 inches in the middle here to measure for our gauge swatch. So these are superfluous stitches in any case, so we don't really care about them. So I always leave them to be just a little bit wonky. I don't care. I just ignore them and just say, oh yeah, look, see how loose they are? Who cares? Moving on. So get away from those little anchor stitches and let's get to the main meat of our pattern here in the middle. So to catch a float, it's really up to you how often you like to do it. I like to catch my floats for more than 4 stitches in a row. So for example, on this side here, or let's pull our chart out, I'm using the Choose Love Cowl by Kelsey Stevens of Primrose Yarn. And here's the chart here on my iPad. So as you can see, for this particular chart, I really like it for a practice chart because there's lots of variation between how many stitches of each color you have to knit in a row. For here you see you knit 1 red followed by 4 white, 1 red, 4 white, 1 red, 4 white. So in this case I wouldn't catch a float because I only have 4 of one color in a row. If this was 1 pink, 5 white, I would catch my float in the middle. So up here you can see on this row, on row 6, we have 2 red followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 white. So by catching floats, I mean that you're going to want to catch the strand of pink yarn running back behind your work here in the middle of this, as to prevent any kind of loose flopping around pieces of work in the back. So here we see in this particular pattern we have a lot of variation between how many of each color we're working with. On this particular row, row 8, you have 1 white background color followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 contrast colors. If I was not catching floats, I would have a huge strand of white yarn running behind my work, which can get caught on your earrings, your glasses, your fingers. Just, I'm not a big fan of it. So in order to prevent that from happening, we're going to trap, catch, however you want to say it, our float. And I prefer to do that in the middle of my line of stitches. You can also alternate from row to row. It's important not to catch your float in the same position every single time. So on the next row, if this was repeating itself, I would catch it, say, here on this area and then here on this side. So that way I'm not catching it in the same place every time. If you catch your floats in the same position every time, you can see here on my swatch that I knit, I did that so you could see it creates these little V's on the wrong side of your work where you've trapped the work in the same position on each row, repeating itself. And what can happen is on the front side of your work, you can see it's very slight. And again, this is your own personal preference. Personally, I don't like to do that because I feel like it does create a little bit of a laddering situation here in the work on the front side. It's really apparent in fingering weight sweaters. If you catch the yarn in the same place over and over again, it will create a bit of a blemish on the front side of your work. So that's something to keep in mind when knitting color work, that you're going to want to alternate the position of where you catch the yarn.